And good morning, everybody. Here are your notes and examples for IXL.com, Algebra 1, section BB.6. And it's going to be solving quadratics by using square roots. So, for example, if we had a quadratic form, y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. If you don't have these other two terms, the bx and the c, and all you have is the y equals ax squared, so therefore the variable is only in one place, the x squared, then what you can do is you can isolate the x squared and cancel out the square with a square root. So, for example, if I had x squared equals 36. So we have x squared. What is the opposite of squaring something? That would be square rooting. So we're going to square root both sides. So the square root of x squared should be x, because x times x equals x squared. And the square root of 36 should be 6. So this should make the original equation true. So if x was 6, then we could put the 6 back in for x. So you're going to get 6 squared equals 36, which is true, so that checks out as a solution. The catch to these is there's actually more than one solution, because there is another number that we can put in for the original x and square it and still get 36. So the other number would be the negative form. So x could also be negative 6, because if we put in negative 6 as a solution, negative 6 times negative 6 is still 36. So when you square root both sides, you need to account for both the positive and the negative form. So you're going to get two solutions. And let's do one more. So let's say we had that x squared is equal to 49. Then we can square root both sides. The square root of x squared, those cancel, and you are left with x. And when we square root the 49, we need to remember that it could be both the plus or the minus that is going to work. So the square root of 49 is 7. So you should get two solutions, the plus 7 or the minus 7. And you can write it as one statement, x equals plus or minus 7. In IXL.com, you'll probably need to write it as two separate answers in two different answer boxes. So we're saying that 7 would work and negative 7 would work as a final solution. And like any algebra problem, you can take your solutions, you can plug them back into the original and see if they check out. So 7 squared does equal 49, and negative 7 squared also equals 49. And here are some quick examples from IXL.com. And here's our first one. X squared needs to equal 4. So what could we put in for x? We know 2 times 2 is 4. We know negative 2 squared is 4. Just to kind of practice the algebra, since you're going to need it for other problems where the numbers are a little bit trickier. We're going to square root both sides. So that will get x by itself. And then plus or minus the square root of the 4. So basically we're just square rooting both sides, just don't forget the plus or minus. So x will need to be plus or minus 2. So in your solution box you're going to want to put positive 2, and in the other one you will want to put negative 2. And let's go ahead and look at another one. So here we have k squared is equal to 100. So we're going to square root both sides. So the square root of k squared should be k, because k times k is k squared. And the square root of 100 is 10. And don't forget your plus or minus, since they both work. 10 squared is 100, and negative 10 squared is also 100. So we have a solution of 10 and negative 10. And let's look at another. G squared is equal to 121. So square root both sides. So the square root of g squared would be g. And the square root of 121 should be 11. And don't forget the plus and minus, since there's two answers, 11 and negative 11. Since both of those squared will get you 121. And m squared is equal to 144. Square root both sides. So m equals plus or minus 12. 12 times 12 is 144. And here's where we get into something a little bit different. Notice the p squared is not by itself. You need to have the variable isolated on one side of the equation before you can square root both sides. So if we start out with a p squared minus 9 equals 0, job 1 is going to be to get that p squared, the p squared all by itself. So first step, we're going to add 9 to both sides. So you can't square root both sides until you have the square all by itself. So that will get us p squared equals 9 is on the right hand side now. So we just add 9 to both sides. And now that we have p squared by itself, now we can square root both sides. So we'll square root the left, and that will get us p. And we will plus or minus the square root of 9. And the square root of 9 is 3. So there's really just one additional step on this type of problem. You need to, again, get that p squared, the p squared all by itself first. Then you can square root both sides. So we have two answers, 3 and negative 3. And let's go look at another one. Same idea here. The u squared is not by itself yet. So we need to add 73 to both sides. So that's going to get u squared by itself. And we just need to figure out the 48 plus the 73, which should be 121. So we added 73 to both sides, so we now have the square all by itself. Now we can go ahead and square root both sides. And that will get u by itself. And the square root of 121 should be 11. And don't forget your plus and minus. And another type of problem, they're going to ask you how many possible solutions you can have. Generally speaking, the answer is usually that you can have 2 solutions. If you are square rooting a positive number. So for example, on all the other problems we've done before this, there were 2 solutions. There are a few exceptions where you can get either no solution or 1 solution. Where you can get 1 solution is if you're square rooting 0. So for example, if you have x squared equals 0, then x is going to be the square root of 0 if you square root both sides. And the square root of 0 is just 0. So you're not going to get both a positive and a negative answer. You're just going to get one answer, 0. So this would be an example of where you can get one solution. And then there are some cases where you can get no solution. And you would get no solution if you are trying to square root a negative number. So, for example, if you had x squared equals negative 36. So if you remember what a square does, a square is multiplying a number by itself. So there are no two numbers that if you multiply them by themselves, you produce a negative number. To produce a negative number when you multiply, you need to have both a positive and a negative. So for example, if you tried to make negative 36, let's say you tried 6 and 6. 6 times 6 does make 36, but it's not making negative 36, which is what we need. Negative 6 times negative 6 makes positive 36. So again, it's not making the negative 36. And if you tried one or the other, so if you tried 6 times negative 6, you do get negative 36, but we can't say that this is a square because those two numbers aren't the same number. So you can't say it's 6 squared or negative 6 squared because they're two different numbers. So this is not going to work. So in summary, if you are trying to square root a negative number, then it's going to be no solution. So if it's a positive number, you can get two solutions. If it's 0, you can get one solution. If it's a negative number, it's going to be no solution. So for this particular question, d squared is equal to positive 12. So if you're trying to square root a positive number, you should get two solutions. So if you square root a positive, you get two solutions. Let's write this down as a summary real quick. So if you square root a positive number, it's two solutions. So if you square root a positive number, so here's your quick little summary. If you are squaring something and it's a positive number, you should be able to solve that for two solutions. If you have the square and it's working out to be 0, that is one solution. And if you have a square equal to a negative number, try to solve that and you get no real solution. So no solution. And let's look at another one. So how many solutions would this equation have? So first we need to get the square by itself. So subtract 97 from both sides. So here's the original. And we will subtract 97 from both sides. So x squared equals 13 minus the 97. And that should get us negative 84. So notice we have a negative, and we can't square root a negative number. So if we tried to solve this, we'd be trying to square root negative 84, and you can't square root a negative number, so we're going to say no solution. And let's look at another one. So this one we have k squared minus 44 equals 0, and we're going to add 44 to both sides to get k squared by itself. So k squared equals 44. And if we tried to square root this, you would be square rooting positive 44. So if you did try to solve this, you would be square rooting both sides, and you're square rooting a positive number. So that's going to be plus or minus. So you're going to get two solutions. So we can square root positive numbers, and if we're solving an equation, we have that plus or minus, so we have two solutions. And the next one, how many solutions? So you can already see if I subtract 95 from both sides, it's going to end up being a negative number, which is going to be no solution. So here's the original. Start going through the algebra. We're going to get n squared equals a negative number, and we can't square root a negative number, so that's going to be no solution. And this one, so we have v squared times 4 plus 30 equals 18. So again, we need to get v squared by itself first. So we're going to subtract 30. So undo your addition and subtraction first. So your 30s cancel. You're left with 4v squared. And 18 minus the 30 should get you negative 12. And then divide both sides by 4. So your 4's cancel, and you're left with v squared, and negative 12 divided by 4, that should be negative 3. And to finish solving this, to get v by itself, you would have to square root a negative 3. And we cannot square root negative numbers. So since we end up with a negative there, it's going to be no solution. And here's one more. This one's a little different because you end up with a fraction for an answer, which is fine. The numbers are not always going to be nice, neat integers. So if we have 64 r squared minus 4 equals 0, we need to get r squared by itself first. So we're going to add 4 to both sides. So your 4's will cancel. And 64r squared is on the left, equals 0 plus 4 on the right would be 4. And then we want to divide both sides by 64. So we end up with r squared equals 4 over 64. And once you're here, you can go ahead and square root both sides. So we will square root the square, and we will be left with r. And we're going to square root the fraction. And if you're square rooting a fraction, that's the same as square rooting the top and square rooting the bottom all at the same time. So the square root of the 4 up top is 2. And the square root of the 64 is 8. And don't forget you need your plus and your minus, since they're both going to work, both the positive and the negative. And then you could simplify the 2 over 8. That's going to get you 1 over 4. So 2 goes into itself once, 2 goes into 8 4 times. So you should get plus or minus 1/4. So in your answer box you can write 1/4 and minus 1/4. And that should be your 2 solutions for that one. And that is it for the notes and the examples for IXL.com, section BB.6, solving equations by plus or minus the square root of both sides.